Here's a demonstration of the physical inventory process that we built for a client that's got in the jewelry business. So the first part of the suite web is presented as a screen where you can either pick a physical inventory count that you've previously begun working on, or you can select the location, submit, and it will start a brand new count. The count will be named based on the location, the date, and your own name. This is your count. Now, what happens when you start a new count is the system goes out and creates a snapshot with all of the items at this location and their count. And then as you're counting, that's stored sort of side by side so that later you can compare the snapshot taken at the beginning with count due during the physical. Reason that the client wanted this particular tool was for the following features. First, there's a batch mode process. Now, again, they're inventorying jewelry, so there are lots of one-off pieces. And sometimes there are, for example, boxes or drawers that have the same item, or maybe they know there should be 30 watches in here. So in batch mode, you can say, hey, I'm about to count a drawer, under the register, right? And there could be 35 items. And then as you count them, it's going to validate that the count matches the 35. But the real power of this is they wanted to be able to process this inventory very rapidly. They generally use a scanner, and so they scan things very quickly. Every item has a barcode or something on it, and so they can go very rapidly. And so what they did not want is real-time validation. In other words, as they enter the item, they didn't want to immediately validate whether that was good or not, because that round trip simply took so long. Plus, their inventory has so many items, trying to preload that on the client also became prohibitively expensive performance-wise. They have hundreds of thousands of items across the store. So they wanted to quickly be able to enter the item and then validate the whole list. The second powerful feature of this is that most systems that do this compare what you entered here against a single field on the item, maybe the item ID or the UPC code. But this client, their barcodes sometimes reflect the UPC code of the item. Sometimes they reflect the item code. Sometimes they reflect other custom fields that exist on the item record. And so they wanted validation to work against any of those fields. And that was the real power of the tool. So for example, they could enter a single item like this, and in another row, maybe enter a UPC code. And then I'm just going to enter a couple more to demonstrate a couple things, and then something that is really about. The other thing that's powerful is the way scanners work is when you scan a UPC code, they send the code, whatever is on the barcode, and they immediately hit the enter key. And of course, when they're scanning UPCs, it by implication means they just scanned a quantity of one. So if you type in something and just hit enter, the screen automatically defaults to assuming one. That way, with a barcode reader, they can very rapidly just bleep, 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 and the rows are just that. After you've done all the scanning, you hit validate, and at that point, it will check. And so, for example, these two are perfectly fine, because you display name. This one here, it determined could not be at this location, right? The system thinks that you have none at this location. And this one here, it just couldn't validate by any rules at all. Again, once you've provided everything without errors, and this is not an error, it's just a warning, then you hit submit, and it does a final validation and stores the count. And now you can just go on and perform another batch and another batch. Anyway, they said that as a result of this, their process of inventorying store would drop by something like 60 or 70%.